Okay, writer to writer. You'll get this. This is the word count of an article that I wrote yesterday, and so is this. It's the same article. No trickery, no changing, no rewriting, no pasting back in a bit. It's the same text, but it's counted by two different apps. Let me tell you that I do have some practical advice here. If word counts are really important to you, then I have some actual useful advice that'll mean you completely avoid these sometimes massive differences. Yeah, but I'll also tell you, this 58 Keys edition is really just for the sheer fun of why this happens and how something we take for granted, like a word count, has so much behind it. I love this stuff. Hello, I'm William Gallagher and this is 58 Keys, which as ever, as always, is for writers like you and me who obsess over who use and who write on Macs and iPhones and iPads. Do subscribe and like or support 58 Keys on Patreon, because there's always so much to talk about. It's just this time I don't know how many words it's going to take. But okay, tell you what, let's do something useful. I'm not going to leave you hanging for that practical advice that I was telling you about. It's just this. If word or character counts are critical to you and your publisher or your editor or your producer, be sure that you are both using the same word processor. Actually, I would say the same platform, but editors and publishers, odds are they're typically going to be on PCs, and this really is not sufficient reason to switch from a Mac to Windows. Is there a sufficient reason? Anyway, there you go. One more part to this practical thing, even though I promise you it's practical and you're just, unless you already know it, you're going to doubt me here because it's insane. If you are both using Microsoft Word, also be sure that you're on the same version number if you can, and that you are both using the same Microsoft Word way to count words. I mean, this has got to be better now. I don't think I could cope if it was still as bad as it was when I hit this problem 20 years ago. But Word at least used to have several ways to show you the word count, and they used to give you a different result. Yeah, well, okay, of course they would. If I can face remembering it, okay, I will tell you how Word actually caused me a problem because of this. Okay, now you're looking at me like, problem? Word counts are handy, but they're hardly problems, they hardly matter. And okay, if your book contract is for 80,000 words, nobody is going to cry on the floor if it's 79,900 or 81,200. I'm trying to work out what 10%. Anyway, actually, universities, apparently, I can't believe this, apparently it's common for creative writing students in universities, at least here in the UK, to be set an assignment with a word count, but told, no, you can come in 10% over or under the word count. Please tell me why. EastEnders episodes, they can't run 10% short because you couldn't finish the script, and BBC One is not going to nudge back the next show to start a few minutes late because you don't know how to edit. Work out, get it right. Okay, but other than overall general purpose things, word counts, they are no more than a guide. All right, I tell you what, except when they're not, because you put this back in my mind, I'm just going to tell you. I'll try to tell you quickly. True story. I used to write for the Radio Times website here in the UK. Radio Times is like the UK's equivalent of TV Guide. And one job was to deliver, it was captions or headlines, I can't remember which now, that were a really, really specific length, every time. I want to say 138 characters. So, well, 138 characters. And it was quite a skill, actually writing a headline or caption that was precisely 138 characters long, never 137, never 139. But I liked to think I got rather good at it. Except something like 4 months into that job, the editor of that section finally cracked and complained at me. Why, she said, why do you always deliver 141 characters? For 4 months, she had been required to cut every headline down by 3 characters. And well, that really meant she was writing the captions herself. She was having to do the work I was being paid for and that I believed I was doing. I believed I was doing it well. And yes, it was a word count error. Well, okay, a character count error. But here's the thing. She was writing in Microsoft Word and so was I. It's this thing of the different word counts. Now, I knew, and if you've seen it, perhaps you do too, that there is a word and character count. The word displays, if you want, at the foot of your screen as you write, but it's a guess, it's an estimate. And I know that, I knew it, because what is the point? I mean, were you to click on this random guess, Word would then properly word it and properly, correctly calculate the word count. And so that's what I did over and over every day. Click, wait, do it. Right. I could instead have gone schlepping through Microsoft Word's menus because, yes, there is a word count available under the menus. Of course there is. Just, it's different. 2 word counts, different. Of course. Yeah, you got it. She was using one of these. She was using the menu one, I was using the footer one, and they were different, consistently different all the time. And she was right, by the way, and I was wrong. The Microsoft Word menu was giving her the correct word or character count, and we worked this out. We knew this because the whole reason for 138 characters was that was precisely the space left for the headline or the caption in this particular bit of the Radio Times website system. So she would put it in, she would see it was right. Okay. That's an example of a word count difference that I think is inexcusable. And in a small way, it contributed to my running away from Microsoft Word. I mean, okay, the crashes that lose you a lot of Word, they may have had a bigger impact, but Word, deep down in the heart of it, Word is shockingly badly made, and this was a visible example. I was mortified, and all these years later, thinking of it again, I still am. My editor had to do my work for me while I was still getting paid, and while she still had everything else she had to do. Let me have one of those swipey things while I take a deep breath. Right, thanks. Okay. The fun part, I think it's the fun part. As ever, I mean, you're a writer, you're in front of the keys as much as I am, you'll know at least some of this, but a lot of it happens to be new to me, and I think we will appreciate it most when we get the whole context. So forgive me going through the bits you already know and that maybe you've obsessed about too, such as this. There are 3 words in the title, Pride and Prejudice. I don't feel that's a contentious statement, but how many words are there in this title? My So-Called Life. So-called is a hyphenated word, and that's what we tend to say, isn't it? We say hyphenated word, singular. We don't say hyphenated words, plural. Therefore, QED, My So-Called Life is in fact a 3-word title. Now you can disagree, and I actually think I can hear you muttering, but you can also definitely see there is an argument both ways for My So-Called Life to be 3 or to be 4 words. There's an argument there to be had. And the thing is, when you use the word count in your word processor or your text editor of choice, whatever it is, or your publishing app even, the men and women who wrote that app have had to make a decision over which side of that argument they want to be on. They have to. They can't choose randomly. They can't have your word count differ depending on whether the wind is in the east or not. Although Microsoft Word, let it go, William, let it go. These people who write apps, who write text editor apps, they have to decide. Okay, they have to decide, and you and I shouldn't have to care, except when there are times when you get examples like that one I showed you, the 2 dramatically different word counts for exactly the same piece of writing, the same article. Let me explain that one a little bit more, a bit more precise. This is the latest version of Drafts 5. It's a text editor I write in a lot, I like very much. And in the last few weeks, it had an update that added a feature where if you select some text, well, the regular word count at the bottom of the screen shows you how many words there are in that selection. And when you don't select anything, you get the total word count for the whole piece, as Drafts always has done. Actually, to be fair, I don't know why Drafts wasn't always this. I don't know why it didn't always do this selection word count, but it didn't. Now it does. Okay. Thing is, but because it didn't, and I wanted a word count, I tended to just ignore the word count in Drafts, the total word count, because what I want is to know the count of my finished piece. I don't want source notes, transcribed interviews. I don't care about different versions I may have tried, different sentence structures, whatever. So for years, actually, until Drafts 5 added this, I've been using a utility called PopClip to count a selection. Select what I want to count, look at PopClip, there's the number. And again, here are those two counts though. This one is from Drafts 5, this one is from PopClip, and again, they're both right. Or at least, neither is wrong. Come back with me to Pride and Prejudice, which is a favourite of mine, but just looking at the title. If you were a word processor, you would have to figure out what actually constitutes a word. I mean, even forgetting the hyphenate example, just what is a word? Any word. And one way is to call a word a group of letters between spaces. So actually, you could count the spaces to get the number of words. But Pride and Prejudice is a 3-word title, yet it only has 2 spaces. So spaces can't be enough by themselves. And by the way, I'm only talking about English. I mean, I do speak English, American, Australian and New Zealand. But yeah, Chinese, for example, apparently, at least in some cases, doesn't have what I would call a space between words. But even sticking in English, even sticking with spaces, you could count full stops, couldn't you? At the full stop at the end of a sentence. Although Pride and Prejudice isn't a sentence, it's a title. So you have to count spaces or full stops and maybe a return. There you makes a word. Oh, right. Yeah. The famous Bruce Springsteen song, the 6-word born in the USA. There are plenty of people who write USA as U full stop, U period, space, S period, space, A period. And I'm getting a bit lost now myself. I don't know how you can say for certainty that should count U as one word and not 3. But other than that, using full stops, it would get every sentence in a paragraph, but still not titles. To count words, you need to count spaces and full stops or periods, but also returns at the end of the line, paragraph marks. Only because I would not stop for death, wrote Emily Dickinson, death kindly stopped for me. Should that first death, because I would not stop for death, be caught and counted because of the space before the word wrote that followed? Or do we need to now count commas as well? I don't know. Nor do I know when that same poem, you've seen this, it could be written out like this, with a slash there. I mean, all right, surely, come on, surely no one is going to count that slash character as a word. I mean, it's something in between 2 spaces, but yeah, no, it's just a slash. It's not a word. Come on. Maybe you have an exception dictionary if it's just punctuation. But actually, yeah, some places do. Drafts 5, in this case, would tell us that line is 12 words. PopClip says it's 13 because it counts the slash. All of which is to say, you and I, we should not be surprised by different word processors written by different people coming up with different word counts for our work because they, the app developers, have made different choices. I mean, apparently, I haven't seen this, but apparently it's true. Some text editors and word processors somewhere in the world supposedly even count concatenated words as 2, don't as do not. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see them do that before I believe it, but you hear these things when you get into this kind of discussion. Anyway, none of this, right? None of this, as much as I love it, none of it accounts for such a huge discrepancy between Drafts and PopClip, this one in my article. But it's still a difference caused by one single decision by the app developers, and this is what it was. Pull out a bit. Here's the middle of that article written in Drafts to go online. I mean, don't bother reading it. Just notice that link, that URL in the center there. You can see where this is going, can't you? PopClip sees that whole address as one word. Drafts counts every bit of the address as a separate word. It's counting the slashes, it's counting the dots. It's not wrong, neither of them is wrong, it's just different. Except, when I want to know my word count for the day, I'll put up with an address like that being counted as one word. I mean, across a day, what's it going to mean? 40 links are counted, and so I'm 40 words over. That's not going to bother me. I mean, not enough to use, say, for example, I could do this. Text soap. I could remove all the HTML and then count that. Not fussed enough to do that. But when Drafts introduced this selection count, and the first time I saw this massive difference, I did suddenly wonder if PopClip has been letting me down. Have I been undercounting my writing by hundreds and thousands of words? I live by the word count, didn't it? I thought of that Radio Times editor of mine, surely giving up on me entirely now. But whether it's with her or anyone else where the count really matters, I now know that we have to use the same word processor and the same way of counting where we possibly can. For myself, as much as I really like Drafts and I will continue writing in it, for word counts, I'm sticking to PopClip. I mean, I do like PopClip as an app, and as you can see, every time I show you a word count, there are other things it does, other tools, other options, and actually there's a 58 keys episode just about PopClip. I'll put a link in the description thing. And actually, I suppose ultimately these days, PopClip, Draft, it doesn't matter. I only need a word count to satisfy myself that I'm getting somewhere. Can't count quality, can count quantity, so. But I went so wide-eyed when I first saw that draft selection count. I went off testing everything, copying the same text and different apps to figure out what's happening. And then, of course, I started remembering that Radio Times editor that I drove to drink all those years ago. And all of it just made me want to talk to you about it. I fully accept this has not been the most practical or the most useful 58 keys, but I tell you this because you're a writer. I know you'll understand it, and I hope you might relish the detail as much as you can tell I do. I cannot get enough of detail behind things, detail things people do, especially that they do to make things that we use all the time and that we never think about. Calm down, for better reason, breathe. That's it for this quite unusual edition of 58 Keys. Thank you very much for watching. Now take care of yourself, and let's both go write something, and we won't bother counting it, okay? Write something, and I'll see you soon.